All right, now let's get to Marc, Lions of Liberty. Marc, we got you up.
Blake, Brian, what's happening?
Morning.
I'm actually in tears right now because I was just I was cutting up some onions while I was listening and waiting.
Feeling some time here.
I thought we were making you laugh that much.
It's not because of Paul Krugman or the fiscal cliff or even the laughter you're inciting in me.
All right, Blake, what
so
is the fiscal cliff? What is it?
Well, let's ask Marc. Let's get Marc. Marc's more of an expert in the economic realm, I believe.
The fiscal cliff is essentially this fabricated event that is going to occur. It's basically the result of the latest kicking of the can down the road, which is all Congress has done since we came off the gold standard, essentially, in the 70s when we were completely delinked from gold. Essentially, the debt keeps spiraling. They keep raising the debt limit, and there's always a crisis over this raising of the limit because everyone talks about how the debt is going to destroy us, and it is in a way. But the debt that they're talking about is kind of, I mean, even if we paid off $17 trillion somehow tomorrow, which is impossible. Even if we taxed, everyone at 90% like Paul Krugman wants, it wouldn't really happen like that because people would stop producing if we taxed them 90%. It would be called salt. I'm sorry, I pronounced that wrong. Whew. The tears are in my eyes here.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Gulch? Is that what it is?
Yes, it is Gulch, where everybody says, you know what, you guys take over.
I've never said it out loud before. It's actually a hard phrase to get out. When you have
just like Louisianian and Cuyahoga County, those are also hard words to get out. Gulch.
And Gulch. Okay. But, the producers are going to stop producing if they're taxed the amount that it would take to tax people to pay this off. So it's just not going to happen. The only way it's going to get paid off, which is the only way to pay anything, is through printing money and devaluation of the currency, which is the plan. So that's going forward regardless of what happens with the fiscal cliff. But essentially the fiscal cliff is, to get back to that, away from my ranting for a minute, is a series of tax increases that are going to an effect at the same time. And at the same time, we're also going to see supposed drastic cuts in military spending as a result of the Super Committee failing to come to an agreement. In 2011, there's going to be these supposedly drastic cuts to the military, even though that these cuts are actually increases in spending. Because increases in spending are built into every single government agency and programming, and all of these cuts that they're talking about, these billions of dollars in cuts, are only cuts to the increase that was already set to occur. So spending will still go up, and yet this is supposed to, frighten everyone into thinking that a crisis is coming. And a crisis is coming, but it's not the crisis they're talking about. It's not the spending cut crisis. Spending is the problem, not lack of spending being, the problem. But the real crisis is going to be the dollar crisis. And if they keep, if we keep spending and keep devaluating the currency, keep printing money, which we have to do to pay off hundreds of trillions of unfunded obligations for Medicare, Social Security, and everything else coming down the road, the only option is devaluation of the currency, and that is on the real crisis. That's the real cliff, is the complete collapse of the dollar. And that's coming either way. Obviously, I don't want taxes to go up, so that's always bad. But that taxes don't mean anything if we're not going to decrease spending, because every ounce, I almost said ounce of silver, but we know we're not spending silver. Every cent, every penny, every dollar spent by the government is a tax, because every dollar comes out of the private sector. Every dollar is either taxed and taken by force, or created out of thin air, which is a tax on the current money supply. So either way, this problem continues. The fiscal cliff is just another political drama, and it will likely result in yet another kicking of the can down the road, as every single other compromise that has resulted from one of these fabricated crises has been.
So what is the plan?
Down the road.
But what is the plan with kicking it down the road? Just wait for everyone else to fail worse, and we've just pushed it off, survived a little bit longer. We've squeezed a little extra moisture out of this towel. And in the meantime, you being so much worse puts us in a better position to do that much better. So if we can just be the last person to fall off the cliff, at least we get a few extra days to enjoy the scenery. Or what is the plan of that? If that is their plan, which it a lot of advice.
I mean, I don't understand the real plan. I don't think that if we're talking about the specific politicians that are going to be creating this compromise or what have you, that their plan is to get elected again in a couple of years. So that's their plan. And so they'll craft something that kind of pleases everybody. They'll raise the debt limit. They will keep the spending in place because, all their districts need all that money coming in. And they will try to appear like they're not raising taxes on their base, whoever that may be. So Obama will still champion that he's not going to allow, tax cuts for the middle or tax raises for the middle class to go up. Republicans will, keep fighting for something. They might cave on taxes to the highest bracket. I think some kind of tax is going to go up. I would be surprised if it didn't, but I don't think that's there. I think politically it's still too difficult to raise taxes on, most people. Because right now, under the current system, a lot of this is the result of the supposed, as they're called, Bush-era tax cuts expiring. So even under those, even the people that make $20,000 are still going to pay a higher tax. They're going to have to pay $400 more a year. If you make $60,000, you're going to pay, I think it's like $1,500 more a year. Above that, it increases exponentially. So I have a hard time believing that they're going to raise taxes on those bottom levels, just because there's so many people in that scenario that don't make a lot of money and yet are still being taxed to death in one way or another, whether, like you guys were saying before, whether it's direct taxes or whether it's at the grocery store, where we're all getting killed no matter what tax bracket we're in.
That's good points. Brian, you dropped out there. I got you back.
Yeah, I was wondering because we're quickly running out of time here, and I wanted to pick Marc's brain on this before we run out of time. I don't know if Blake, if you want to bounce to just a couple of these headlines before we run out of here, but I wanted to get Marc's take on Ron Paul's farewell address. You said the 10 things you took away from it, I think, was on your LionsofLiberty.com page, and go check that website out, LionsofLiberty.com. And Blake and I found another article, 32 Lies of Ron Paul. So if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, we also got the Paul Krugman and the Twinkie Manifesto. Well, there's a lot of things we get. Yeah, we're going to hit in the next few minutes here. And, here's another weird little revelation I had the other day. Speaking of Marc, you were talking about, I think you were saying something about Nixon or the gold standard or whatever. I was kind of thinking, without the Vietnam War, we wouldn't be on a Keynesian system. It's kind of an odd little connection.
It's a good connection because ultimately, I mean, the wars are always the biggest expenditures, and then it's the guns and butter thing. It's according to Nixon, we could have both guns and butter. Meaning we could have guns, we could have the wars, we could fight the wars, and then we can have welfare too. We can keep the population happy. We can keep the welfare coming. We can do both because we can come off the gold standard. We don't have to be tied to this crazy thing anymore. And that wasn't really a true gold standard before 71, but they still did have to. We didn't have a gold standard within the U.S., but they still had to redeem the currency to foreign nations and foreign central banks with gold. And
to keep the federal.
I mean, you can only do that for so long, though, because when our spending increased for the Vietnam War, that a lot of countries wanted their money back. They're like, well, they see how much money we're printing, so they don't want dollars anymore. Now they want their gold, and at some point we're going to run out of gold. So Nixon had to say, we're not going to do that anymore. We're no longer giving you gold. You're keeping your dollars.
Yeah, because we were under an agreement that gold had to be redeemable. Yeah, or what? Dollars had to be redeemable in gold for like $35 an ounce. Right. But then after the Vietnam War, there was no way we could keep that going, so they had to take us off the gold standard. Yeah, that's another different thing altogether. So,
don't you just want to be in Back to the Future and kind of get sent back in a DeLorean and be able to buy $35 an ounce gold? It's such a crazy thing to think now that that's what it costs, but that just shows you the true cost of money creation. I mean, gold used to be $35, and like 30 years later, it's $2,000. So that gives you an idea of how much less your currency has become since then, due to the creation of new currencies. So it's a good illustration of how fast this is happening. But what's really a better illustration is how fast it's doubled, because gold went up it was still around $700-800 about 4 years ago, but now it's over double that. So that's that stimulus money. That's that that 2008 bailout money. That's getting into the system, and that's people putting their dollars back into gold. So that's a good reflection of what's going on kind of with the currency creation.
And it also led to a new economic philosophy of Keynesian philosophy, which we had to get in. Yes, after we got off the gold standard, we got into the Keynes. We are all Keynesians now, and so now we got Paul Krugman, and 40 years later, now he's talking about the Twinkie Manifesto. Can you give us a minute on that?
I didn't see that specific piece yet. That
okay.
Twinkie Manifesto itself. What is that? I know all about the Twinkie bankruptcy or the hostess bankruptcy.
But it's also going into the 91% tax rate, which you were kind of touching on, and kind of bringing back this whole nostalgia of the 50s. But I think it's maybe I don't know if he's really telling the full story here. Do you have any comment on it? Yeah. I don't want to get too sidetracked. We've only got a few minutes left here. Just about the corporate profits twice as large and a tax rate of 91%.
Well, the tax rate of 90%. I know Krugman likes to refer to this a lot. Because,
but that was before Keynesian system. That was still a gold standard. It's kind of a clever way of
Right. You're talking about how they used to tax, like in the right after the World War II. We had a huge economic boom because we decreased all the war spending. We brought the troops home. At least that's the Austrian, business perspective, but the Austrian economics perspective. But the other perspective that kind of people like Paul Krugman tout is that the reason we had such a great boom was because of the war spending and because of the 90% tax rate on the highest income earners, and that we had a much higher tax rate for corporate taxes and all this stuff. So his argument is completely kind of flipped around because he's not taking into account the different types of income now. Back then, in the 50s, income was only taxed in one way. Everything was income. So, and everything counted against income. So if you lost $500,000 in the real estate market and you made $500,000, you have $0 in income taxes. So that 90%, and that was the case of a lot of businessmen, a lot of people that had that kind of wealth. There were so many deductions, and income was all kind of looked at the same way, whereas now you have capital gains, you have irregular income, there's like 4 different kinds of income now. We didn't have that back then. So people didn't pay that. Nobody paid that 90% tax. That wasn't a real thing. Under our current system, nobody that made money businesses would just shut down. People that had money, people that were running businesses, nobody's going to work for a penny or 10 cents on the dollar. That's just they're going to pack up their businesses and they're going to close down or they're going to ship out of the United States. It's taxing the producers, and like we said, it's going to just cause people to stop doing business, go into a gulch. If I could have to say that again, and it's going to further destroy the economy.